I'm Amelia, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be saying this. My parents sued me for buying my own house. Yes, you read that right. After years of working double shifts as a nurse and saving every penny, my reward was a court summons.
Why?
Because apparently my hard-earned home should have gone to my sister Tiffany, who at 29 has never held a job longer than 3 months. The family I thought would celebrate my achievement wanted a judge to take it away. Before I dive into how my own family dragged me to court, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you thought would always have your back. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Minneapolis, my childhood wasn't extraordinary. My parents, Thomas and Diane, both worked stable jobs, Dad as an accountant at a local firm and Mom as an elementary school teacher. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we had enough. What we did have in abundance was contrast between me and my younger sister Tiffany. From as early as I can remember, I was the planner. In elementary school, I organized my colored pencils by shade and kept a little notebook where I'd write down homework assignments. My piggy bank had divisions for spending, saving, and giving. Meanwhile, Tiffany operated on instinct and charm. She'd forget her lunch money and somehow end up with 3 desserts from classmates who adore her. When she broke our neighbor's window playing softball, she talked her way out of trouble with a smile and a hug. Amelia thinks everything through, my dad would say, usually with approval, though sometimes it sounded like an accusation of overthinking. Tiffany lives in the moment, my mom would counter, her eyes soft with affection for my sister's spontaneity. In high school, our differences became more pronounced. I joined student council, volunteered at the local hospital, and worked weekends at the mall to save for college. My room was filled with college brochures by sophomore year. Tiffany bounced between interests: theater one semester, photography the next, then suddenly it was all about fashion design. Her room was an artistic mess of half-finished projects, and her report cards featured teacher comments like, "shows great potential," alongside concerning grades. When she failed 2 classes junior year, my parents hired tutors and spent hours helping her study. When I made National Honor Society, they said, "Well, we always knew you would," and moved on to discussing Tiffany's latest crisis. I don't want to sound bitter. I genuinely believe my parents loved us both. But looking back, I can see they operated under the assumption that I would always be fine, while Tiffany needed their constant attention and support. College followed the same pattern. I earned partial scholarships but still needed loans, which I accepted as my responsibility. I chose a practical nursing degree, knowing the healthcare field offered stability. Tiffany attended an expensive art school for 1 semester before dropping out to find herself. She then tried community college, beauty school, and a certification in event planning, none of which she completed. Throughout my 20s, I worked long hours at Minneapolis General Hospital. I started in the emergency department, challenging work that required quick thinking and emotional resilience. Many nights I'd come home physically and emotionally drained, having held the hand of someone taking their last breath or helped save a life through quick action. I earned promotions through dedicated work, eventually becoming a charge nurse by 28. All those years, I lived in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment with furniture I'd picked up secondhand. I packed lunches, limited shopping to necessities, and tracked every dollar in a budgeting app. My one splurge was a coffee maker that ground beans fresh, because after 12-hour shifts, good coffee was medicinal. Meanwhile, Tiffany lived in our parents' basement rent-free between her various attempts at careers and relationships. She'd get excited about a new job: boutique sales associate, receptionist at a salon, assistant to a wedding planner, only to quit within weeks because her boss didn't appreciate her creativity or her coworkers were too negative. My parents would comfort her, assure her she was just too special for ordinary jobs, and cover her car insurance, phone bill, and spending money. When I finally paid off my student loans at 30, I allowed myself to dream about homeownership. I researched neighborhoods, property taxes, and homeowners insurance. I attended first-time homebuyer workshops at the community center. I created spreadsheets comparing mortgage rates and closing costs. After nearly a year of searching, I found it a modest three-bedroom craftsman with a small yard and a maple tree out front. Nothing extravagant, just a solid house in a safe neighborhood with good schools nearby, thinking ahead to a future family, maybe. The previous owners had maintained it well, though the kitchen needed updating and the bathroom fixtures were from the early 2000s. But it had good bones, hardwood floors under the carpet, and large windows that let in morning light. When I got approved for the mortgage and signed the papers, I felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything before. At 31, I had become a homeowner through my own efforts. No family money, no partner to split costs with, just me, my careful planning, and years of disciplined saving. There have been tensions with my family over the years, moments that stung but that I brushed aside in the name of family harmony. Like when my parents missed my nursing school graduation because Tiffany had an art installation opening the same weekend. "You understand, right? You always handle everything so well," my mother had said over the phone. Or the countless family gatherings where Tiffany's temporary job at a hip cafe warranted excited discussion while my promotion to charge nurse received a quick, "That's nice, dear." Or the time I needed emergency dental surgery and asked to borrow $700 until payday, only to have my father lecture me about emergency funds before reluctantly writing the check, which I repaid the following week. That same month, they gave Tiffany $3,000 to start a handmade jewelry business that produced exactly 4 necklaces before she moved on to her next inspiration. But families are complicated, and I told myself my parents were just trying to meet each of us where we were. I needed less support, so I got less. It seemed logical, if not entirely fair. And despite everything, I loved them. I wanted them to be proud of me. I wanted to make them proud of me when they saw my new house. I just never imagined they'd try to take it away. The day I closed on the house was sunny and mild for April in Minnesota. I remember walking through the empty rooms afterward, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors, a sense of possibility filling the space. This was mine. Every mortgage payment would build my equity, not disappear into a landlord's pocket. I could paint the walls whatever color I wanted. I could finally get a dog. That evening, sitting on my lone folding chair in the otherwise empty living room, I called my parents. I expected congratulations, maybe some questions about the closing process, perhaps an offer to help move furniture or paint. "Oh, you went through with it?" My mother's voice held surprise rather than excitement. "Yes, I closed today. I'm officially a homeowner," I said, trying to maintain my enthusiasm despite her lukewarm response. "That's nice. How many bedrooms did you say it has?" she asked.
3.
"One for me, one for a home office, and a guest room," I explained. "That's a lot of space for just you." There was something odd in her tone. My father got on the phone then. "Location good? What's the property tax situation? Did you get an inspection?" His questions were practical, but felt more like an interrogation than interest. Still, I invited them over for dinner the following weekend to see the place. "Bring Tiffany too," I added, wanting to share my milestone with my whole family. When Sunday arrived, I had unpacked enough kitchen items to cook a proper meal. I'd borrowed a folding table and chairs from a coworker and bought a bottle of champagne to celebrate. I even hung a home sweet home sign in the entryway. Cheesy, maybe, but it felt right. My parents arrived precisely at 6, with Tiffany trailing behind them, looking bored. After perfunctory hugs, I gave them the tour, pointing out features I loved and renovations I planned for the future. "These cabinets are original hardwood, just need refinishing," I explained in the kitchen. "Looks like a lot of work," my mother commented, running a finger along the countertop. "The backyard is bigger than I expected," my father noted, peering through the sliding door. "Maintenance will take time." Tiffany wandered from room to room with a strange expression. "So, you have 3 bedrooms, all to yourself? Must be nice," she said, her voice dripping with something between envy and disdain. As we sat down to eat, I tried to steer the conversation toward positive topics, asking about my parents' garden plans for spring and Tiffany's latest interest. Apparently, she was considering becoming a social media influencer. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. "Amelia, We need to discuss something about this house purchase. The seriousness in his voice made me put down my fork. What about it? Well, he glanced at my mother, who nodded slightly. Your mother and I are concerned about the timing and, frankly, the selfishness of this decision. I nearly choked on my water. Selfishness? How is buying my own home selfish? My mother reached over to pat my hand. Honey, we always assumed that since you're so good with money and planning, you would help secure Tiffany's future. She's not as equipped for financial matters as you are. Tiffany nodded vigorously. You know I'm still trying to find my path. What exactly are you saying? I asked, though a sick feeling in my stomach told me I already knew. We thought when you were ready to buy property, you would consult us, my father continued. Perhaps purchase something that could accommodate Tiffany too, or even put it in both your names for the future. I stared at them, speechless for several seconds. You expected me to buy a house for Tiffany? With my money? For my work? Not exactly for her, my mother qualified, but with her in mind. Family takes care of family, Amelia. I've been saving for years, I said slowly, trying to process this bizarre expectation. Working extra shifts, living in a tiny apartment, driving a car with 200,000 miles on it. Meanwhile, Tiffany has been living rent-free in your basement, getting financial support well into her 20s. That's not fair, Tiffany interjected, her voice rising. Not everyone can be perfect like you. Some of us are still figuring things out. There's nothing perfect about working hard and being responsible, I countered, feeling heat rise to my face. And I'm not against helping family, but this is my house. I earned it. My father's expression hardened. You've always been selfish with your success, Amelia. Your sister needs stability too, and you're in a position to provide it. How is it my responsibility to provide stability for a nearly 30-year-old woman? I asked, genuinely bewildered. Because you can, Tiffany almost shouted. You don't need all this. You'd be fine in an apartment. I'm the one struggling. Struggling by choice, I replied, my patience evaporating. I've offered to help you apply for jobs, to help with your resume. We're not asking you to give her money, my mother interrupted. Just share this opportunity. You could co-own the house, let her live here. And who would pay the mortgage? The property taxes? The insurance? The repairs? I asked, knowing the answer. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. That's what I thought, I said quietly. You want me to work and pay while Tiffany lives here for free, just like she's done at your house. You're being cruel, my father said, pushing his plate away. Tiffany has artistic talents that haven't been monetized yet. Not everyone fits into the corporate box like you do. I'm a nurse, Dad. I take care of sick people. It's hardly corporate. You know what I mean, he dismissed. You've always fit into systems. Tiffany needs more support to find her way. Tiffany had tears streaming down her face now. I knew you'd react like this. You've always thought you're better than me just because you can follow rules and kiss up to bosses. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I don't think I'm better than you. I just think we've made different choices, and those choices have different consequences. My consequence is that I can afford this house. Yours is that you can't, at least not yet. So you're just going to be selfish and keep it all for yourself? My mother asked, her disappointment evident. It's not selfish to keep what I've earned, I said firmly. What's selfish is expecting someone else to provide you with a house. The dinner deteriorated quickly after that. My father called me callous and materialistic. Tiffany accused me of never loving her. My mother cried and said she'd raised me to care more about family. When they finally left, slamming the door behind them, I sat alone in my new dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food and the champagne I'd never opened. The house that had felt so full of possibility that morning now felt hollow, tainted by their unexpected demands and accusations. I washed the dishes mechanically, tears silently streaming down my face, wondering how my achievement had turned into a family crisis. Had I really been selfish? Was I wrong to want the rewards of my own hard work? For the first time since moving in, I questioned whether this house would ever truly feel like home. The following weeks passed in uncomfortable silence. I sent a text to my parents the day after our disastrous dinner. "I'm sorry things got heated. Can we talk about this calmly?" Their response came hours later. "We need time to process your choices." I tried calling twice after that, but the conversations were brief and cold, my mother answering with short responses while my father refused to come to the phone. Tiffany didn't respond to any of my messages. Her Instagram, however, featured cryptic posts about toxic family members and people who pretend to care but then show their true colors. She didn't name me, but the timing made it clear who she was referring to. Meanwhile, I threw myself into making the house my own. I sanded and refinished the kitchen cabinets, painted the living room a soft sage green, and planted flowers in the front yard. Physical labor helped distract me from the hurt and confusion. During breaks, I'd sit on my new porch swing, a housewarming gift to myself, and try to understand my family's perspective. Yes, I had more financial stability than Tiffany. Yes, families should support each other. But surely that didn't mean sacrificing everything I'd worked for? About 3 weeks after the dinner incident, my cousin Taylor called. "What's going on with you and your parents?" she asked without preamble. "And Diane was telling my mom that you've turned your back on Tiffany and refused to help family." My stomach clenched. "That's not what happened at all." "Did she tell you they expected me to buy a house for Tiffany?" "She said something about you having extra space you wouldn't share," Taylor replied, sounding confused. "And that you've always resented Tiffany for being the creative one." I explained the actual situation, and Taylor whistled low. "That's messed up. You know I love Aunt Diane, but that's not a reasonable expectation." After we hung up, I sat on my couch feeling sick. If they were spreading this narrative to extended family, what else were they saying? Who else now viewed me as the villain? Then came the letter. I almost missed it among the usual junk mail and bills, an official-looking envelope with a law firm's name in the return address. Puzzled, I opened it and pulled out a formal notice informing me that Thomas and Diane Walker were filing a civil complaint against me regarding the property at 1542 Oakwood Lane. My parents were suing me over my house. The notice cited a verbal family agreement that I would provide housing for my sister, Tiffany Walker. It further claimed that my parents had provided financial assistance throughout my adult life with the understanding that these funds would eventually go toward a family home that would benefit both their daughters. I had to read it 3 times before the reality sank in. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. This was a legal battle. That night, I experienced my first full-blown anxiety attack. Sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 a.m., I couldn't catch my breath, my heart racing so fast I was certain I was having a heart attack. After 20 terrifying minutes, the physical symptoms subsided, leaving me exhausted and more afraid than I'd ever been. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. I nearly administered the wrong medication to a patient before my colleague Natalie noticed and stopped me. During our lunch break, she pulled me aside. "What's going on with you? You're not yourself." I broke down and told her everything. Natalie listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to outrage. "You need a lawyer," she said firmly. "My sister went through an ugly divorce last year. Her attorney, Lisa Bryce, was amazing, compassionate but tough. I'll text you her number." That afternoon, I called in sick for the following day and scheduled a consultation with Lisa Bryce. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, warm and professional, without being intimidating. Lisa herself was a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that immediately put me at ease. I explained the situation, showing her the legal notice and text messages between my family and me. "Let me be straight with you," Lisa said after reviewing everything. "This case is legally baseless. Verbal agreements about property typically need some form of documentation to be enforceable, and gifts are presumed to be gifts unless explicitly stated otherwise at the time. However," she added, holding up a finger, "that doesn't mean you can ignore this. They've initiated legal proceedings, and you need to respond appropriately." "So, what happens next?" I asked, feeling slightly relieved but still anxious. "They've filed a complaint. We'll file an answer denying their claims." There will likely be a discovery phase where both sides share evidence. Then possibly mediation, and if that fails, a court hearing. She named her hourly rate, which made me wince despite having anticipated the cost. It's a lot on top of a new mortgage, I admitted. Lisa nodded sympathetically. Unfortunately, legal defense is rarely cheap. The good news is that if their claims are as unfounded as they appear, we may be able to ask the court to have them pay your legal fees. I left her office with a mixture of emotions, relief at having professional guidance, anger that my family had forced me into this position, and deep sadness that our relationship had deteriorated to this point. That night, I barely slept, replaying memories from childhood through adulthood, searching for signs I'd missed. Had my parents always viewed me as merely a future provider for Tiffany? Had any of their pride in my achievements been genuine, or was I just a potential financial resource all along? For the first time, I wondered if I truly knew my family at all. The lawsuit began to affect every aspect of my life. I lost 5 pounds in 2 weeks because my stomach was constantly in knots. Dark circles appeared under my eyes from lack of sleep. I started making small mistakes at work, nothing dangerous to patients, but enough that my colleagues noticed. My supervisor, Jordan, called me into his office after I missed a team meeting. "Amelia, you've always been one of our most reliable nurses. Whatever's going on, it's clearly affecting your work. Do you need to talk to someone?" I gave him a simplified version of the situation, and he immediately approved a week of emergency personal leave. "Patient care has to come first," he said kindly. "And you can't provide proper care when you're this distracted. Take the time you need to get this sorted." I spent that week meeting with Lisa, gathering financial records, and trying to prepare myself emotionally for what lay ahead. The discovery process revealed details that felt like fresh betrayals with each new document. Text messages between my parents and Tiffany, obtained through the legal discovery process, showed they had been planning this for months. In one exchange from February, my mother wrote, "Amelia mentioned she's house hunting. We need to discuss Tiffany's future before she makes any decisions." My father responded, "Agreed. Amelia has always understood her responsibility to family. We just need to remind her." Responsibility. The word burned in my mind. Not love, not connection, responsibility. Even more revealing was a text from Tiffany to my parents after I announced finding the house. "Did you tell her about me living there yet? She needs to understand that's the expectation." Expectation. As if my decade of hard work and saving had all been for someone else's benefit. My financial records clearly showed that any money my parents had ever given me, birthday gifts, the occasional help with car repairs, the dental emergency loan, had been explicitly given as gifts or, in the case of the loan, promptly repaid. There was zero evidence of any agreement that these funds were meant for a future family home. Most disturbing was what we discovered about Tiffany's current situation. Through various legal filings and background checks, Lisa uncovered that Tiffany had accumulated significant gambling debts over the past year. Apparently, her latest passion had been online poker. She'd maxed out 3 credit cards and was facing potential eviction from an apartment I hadn't even known she'd rented. The timeline suggested this financial crisis was the likely motivation behind the sudden urgency to secure her housing through me. "They're using the legal system to solve Tiffany's self-created problems," Lisa said during one of our preparation meetings. "Unfortunately, it happens more often than you'd think. Family financial disputes can bring out the worst in people." The first court appearance was for a preliminary hearing. Walking into the courtroom and seeing my family on the opposite side felt surreal. My parents sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact with me. Tiffany, dressed more formally than I'd ever seen her, kept shooting me smug looks as she whispered to their attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Judge Catherine Harris, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewed the initial filings with obvious skepticism. "Mr. Brennan," she addressed my parents' attorney, "your complaint alleges a verbal agreement regarding property co-ownership, yet provides no documentation of such an agreement. Can you elaborate on the nature of this alleged arrangement?" "Mr. Brennan launched into a flowery speech about family understandings and implicit agreements within the Walker family structure, claiming that as the more financially successful daughter, I had always been expected to provide for my artistically gifted but financially vulnerable sister. Judge Harris didn't appear impressed. And these financial contributions you claim were made toward a future shared property. Do you have records indicating they were loans rather than gifts? Your Honor, in family situations, formal loan documentation is often foregone in favor of mutual understanding, he replied smoothly. The judge looked over her glasses at him. Mr. Brennan, this court deals in evidence, not assumptions about mutual understanding. Nevertheless, she continued, given the family nature of this dispute, I'm ordering mandatory mediation before we proceed further. Both parties will attend mediation with court mediator Phillips within 30 days. Lisa had prepared me for this possibility. Mediation is standard in family disputes, she'd explained. The court prefers families work things out without a trial when possible. The mediation session was scheduled for the following week at the county courthouse. The mediator, Alan Phillips, was a former family court judge with a calm, grandfatherly demeanor. He began by explaining that mediation was confidential and that his role was not to decide who was right, but to help us reach a mutually acceptable resolution. Now, he said, looking between me and my parents, let's try to find common ground. What would each party consider a satisfactory outcome? My father spoke first. We believe Amelia should either transfer ownership of the house to include Tiffany's name, or sell it and use the proceeds to purchase 2 smaller properties. One for each daughter. I stared at him, incredulous. I've had the house for less than 2 months. Selling would mean losing money on closing costs and fees. And I've already started renovations. The mediator nodded. Ms. Walker, what would you consider a reasonable resolution? I took a deep breath. I worked for years to buy this house. I don't believe I have any obligation to give it up. However, I would be willing to help Tiffany with first and last month's rent on an apartment to give her a fresh start. It was more than I felt she deserved after this lawsuit, but I still hoped for some path to family reconciliation. That's insulting, Tiffany interjected before the mediator could respond. First and last month's rent? I deserve security, not a temporary handout. You deserve what you work for, I replied, my temper flaring despite my best intentions to remain calm. Like everyone else in the world. Ladies, please, Mr. Phillips said, raising his hands. Let's keep this productive. There's nothing productive about my sister's selfishness, Tiffany snapped, standing up. She's always thought she's better than me because she can follow rules and fit into boxes. Some of us are different. Some of us have gifts that the world doesn't value monetarily. And some of us have to pay our own bills while figuring out our gifts, I countered. Tiffany's face reddened. You know what? Keep your precious house. I don't want anything from you anyway. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. My parents exchanged glances before my mother said quietly, I think we need to reconvene another time. The mediator sighed. I'll note in my report that mediation was attempted but unsuccessful. The case will likely proceed to a formal hearing. As I left the courthouse, I saw Tiffany in the parking lot, smoking a cigarette and talking animatedly on her phone. Our eyes met briefly before she turned away, but not before I caught the look of determination on her face. This wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get much worse. The day of the court hearing arrived with a sense of finality. Either my family would succeed in taking what I'd worked for, or they would fail, but either way, our relationship would never be the same. The courtroom was mostly empty except for a few legal assistants and a couple waiting for their own case to be called. Lisa and I sat at one table, while my parents, Tiffany, and Mr. Brennan occupied the other. The physical distance between us, just a few feet of polished wood floor, felt symbolic of the emotional gulf that had opened up. Judge Harris entered, and we all rose. After the formalities, she instructed my parents' attorney to present their case first. Mr. Brennan approached the bench with practiced confidence. Your Honor, this is a case about family obligations and promises made. Thomas and Diane Walker raised 2 daughters with very different strengths. Amelia, the elder, was blessed with organizational skills and financial acumen. Tiffany, the younger, possesses extraordinary creative talents but faces challenges in traditional work environments. I fought the urge to roll my eyes as he continued, portraying me as the calculating, cold sister who had always been jealous of Tiffany's artistic spirit and who had deliberately broken a family understanding that my financial success would benefit both of us. My parents testified next, my father speaking about how they had invested in my future with the understanding that I would secure housing for both daughters. My mother, tearfully describing how they had always taught us to share, presented carefully selected family photos, Tiffany and me as children sharing toys, a teenage me helping Tiffany with homework, as evidence of the family ethos of mutual support. When Tiffany took the stand, she put on a performance worthy of the acting classes she'd briefly taken. With trembling voice and occasional dabs at her eyes with a tissue, she described conversations we'd allegedly had about living together someday. Amelia promised me when we were in high school that she would always take care of me, she claimed. She said, "When I buy a house someday, you'll always have a place in it." I've counted on that promise for years. Lisa made notes throughout their testimony, occasionally leaning over to whisper clarifications or points of contention. When it was our turn, she stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, what we've heard today is a creative reinterpretation of family dynamics to justify an unreasonable claim on my client's property. The plaintiffs have presented no evidence of any agreement, verbal or otherwise, regarding Ms. Walker's home. Instead, they've offered a narrative of family expectations that have no standing in contract law." She then called me to testify. With steady voice, I presented my financial records showing how I'd saved for the down payment, every extra shift, every budgeting decision documented. I explained that any financial help from my parents had been clearly given as gifts or loans that were promptly repaid. Lisa then presented evidence of times I had tried to help Tiffany professionally. Emails showing I'd sent her job listings, offered to review her resume, even connected her with a nurse administrator who needed office help. Far from abandoning her sister, Ms. Walker has repeatedly offered practical assistance, which Ms. Tiffany Walker has consistently declined, Lisa pointed out. The most damaging evidence came next. Lisa presented text messages obtained during discovery, messages Tiffany didn't know we had access to. In one, sent to a friend just days before the lawsuit was filed, Tiffany wrote, "Don't worry about the apartment situation. My parents are pressuring Amelia to let me live in her new house. She hasn't agreed yet, but they're convinced they can make her cave." There was never any agreement like they're claiming, but Amelia always gives in eventually. Mr. Brennan objected, claiming the text was taken out of context, but Judge Harris overruled him. Then came the financial bombshell. Lisa presented bank statements showing my parents had refinanced their home 3 months earlier, taking out $50,000 in equity, and that $30,000 of that had been transferred to Tiffany in the weeks before the lawsuit. "Your Honor," Lisa said, "the plaintiffs have claimed throughout these proceedings that they're concerned about their younger daughter's housing security. Yet these financial records show they had the means to address that concern directly. Instead, they gave Ms. Tiffany Walker a substantial sum that appears to have disappeared, and then initiated this lawsuit against her sister." Judge Harris frowned, studying the bank statements. "Mr. Brennan, did your clients disclose this refinancing and fund transfer during discovery?" "Your Honor, those transactions were unrelated to this case," he began, but the judge cut him off. "I'll determine what's relevant, counsel. The court notes that these financial transactions should have been disclosed." Tiffany, who had been whispering urgently to my parents, suddenly stood up. "It wasn't their fault," she blurted out. "I needed the money for some debts, and then I still needed a place to live. I was the one who convinced them we could make Amelia share her house." "Ms. Walker, please be seated," Judge Harris said sharply. "If you wish to make a statement, you'll need to return to the witness stand and be sworn in again." Tiffany collapsed back into her chair, tears streaming down her face, real ones this time. My mother put an arm around her while my father stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. After all testimony concluded, Judge Harris called a brief recess to review the evidence. When she returned, her expression was stern. Having reviewed all testimony and evidence presented, this court finds no legal basis for the plaintiff's claim against Amelia Walker regarding the property at 1542 Oakwood Lane. There is no credible evidence of any agreement, implicit or explicit, that Ms. Walker would provide housing for her sister or that parental gifts were conditional on such an arrangement. Relief flooded through me as she continued. Furthermore, the court is troubled by the apparent attempt to use the legal system to enforce unreasonable family expectations. The defendant has demonstrated that she purchased her home through legitimate means using her own earned income and savings. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed with prejudice. She paused, looking directly at my parents. Additionally, given the findings of this court regarding the merit of this case, the defendant's motion for legal fees is granted. Plaintiffs will reimburse defendant for reasonable legal expenses incurred in defending this baseless action. Tiffany let out a sob and rushed from the courtroom. My mother looked as though she'd been slapped. My father's face had gone pale. Lisa squeezed my arm. "It's over," she whispered. "You won." But as I looked across at my parents, who couldn't meet my eyes, I wondered what exactly I had won, and what it had cost me. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot for nearly an hour after the hearing ended, unable to drive, unable even to call anyone to share the news. The victory felt hollow. Yes, I had kept my house. Yes, the judge had seen through my family's manipulations. But I had lost something precious in the process: trust in the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. "How did it go? Do you need company tonight?" I replied with shaking hands. "Won the case. Could use a friend." That night, Natalie brought takeout and wine to my house. We sat on moving boxes in my still sparsely furnished living room, and I told her everything: the judge's ruling, Tiffany's outburst, my parents' defeated expressions. "You know you did nothing wrong, right?" Natalie said, refilling my glass. "This whole situation is absurd. No rational person would expect you to give your house to your sister." "I know," I said, though part of me still wondered if there was something I could have done differently. "It's just hard to accept that my family would rather sue me than be happy for me." "Some families are toxic," she said bluntly, "and sometimes the healthiest thing is distance." The next morning, I woke to an email from Lisa. The subject line read, "Congratulations," and the message expressed her satisfaction with the outcome while outlining next steps for collecting legal fees. It was professional and upbeat, exactly what a lawyer should send to a victorious client. Yet it only emphasized how sterile this win felt. That night, as I finally unpacked books onto the built-in shelves in my living room, a feature that had made me fall in love with the house initially, I realized this was the first time since the lawsuit began that I was thinking about the house as a home again, rather than as the subject of a legal battle. 2 weeks after the court hearing, my doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon. I opened it to find my father standing on the porch, looking older than I remembered. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I hesitated, then stepped back to let him enter. We sat in awkward silence in my newly furnished living room before he finally spoke. "The house looks nice. You've done good work here." "Thank you," I replied stiffly, waiting for whatever he had really come to say. He sighed heavily. "Amelia, I owe you an apology. What we did, taking you to court, it was wrong. I can see that now." "Can you?" I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. "Your mother and I got caught up in Tiffany's problems. She came to us in a panic about her debts, talking about loan sharks and threats, and we reacted out of fear. We gave her the money from the refinance, but it wasn't enough. When she found out you were buying a house," he trailed off, shaking his head. "She convinced us you had a responsibility to help, that it was the only solution." "And you believed that was reasonable?" I asked. "That I should give up my house for her gambling debts?" He flinched. "We didn't know about the gambling then. She told us it was business investments gone wrong." He looked down at his hands. "But you're right. Even if that had been true, it wasn't your responsibility to fix. We were wrong to expect it, and even more wrong to try to force it through the courts. Part of me wanted to accept this apology, to begin rebuilding the relationship. Another part remained wary. Where's Mom in all this? And Tiffany? Your mother is still processing everything. She's struggling with her role in this mess. And Tiffany? He shook his head again. After the hearing, she admitted to the gambling. She's checked into a treatment program in Duluth. 30 days, then outpatient therapy. I nodded slowly, digesting this information. I'm glad she's getting help. I want you to know, he added, we're paying your legal fees directly. The check is already in the mail to your attorney. It's the least we can do. After he left, I felt conflicted. His apology seemed sincere, but it didn't erase the betrayal. And his explanation, that they were manipulated by Tiffany, shifted blame rather than accepting full responsibility for their actions. A week later, I received a text from my mother asking to meet for coffee. We met at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between my house and theirs. She looked tired, her usual perfect appearance slightly disheveled. I'm sorry, she said immediately, before even sitting down. We should never have taken you to court. It was a terrible mistake. As we talked, she explained her version of events, similar to my father's, but with more emotion. Tears flowed as she described how Tiffany had played on their fears, convincing them I had always been secretive and selfish with money. She showed us texts from you that were edited, my mother admitted. Made it look like you had promised to help with housing and then gone back on your word. I should have known better, should have talked to you directly. Yes, you should have. I agreed, not ready to absolve her completely. Can you ever forgive us? She asked, reaching for my hand across the table. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. I don't know, Mom. I want to, but this isn't something I can just get over. You tried to take my house, something I worked years for. You sided with Tiffany's lies without even asking for my side of the story. That's going to take time to heal, if it ever does. I understand, she said quietly. I just hope we can start rebuilding, even if it's slow. As we parted, she asked if she could see the house again someday, when you're ready. I told her maybe, and I meant it, but I also knew it would be a long time before I invited any family into my space again. The strangest part of the aftermath was how my life simultaneously contracted and expanded. I lost the comfortable assumption that my family would always be there for me, but I gained a deeper appreciation for the friends who stood by me throughout the ordeal. Natalie and I began having weekly dinner rotations at each other's homes. My colleague Jordan invited me to join his family for Sunday barbecues. I connected with neighbors who helped me install a garden in my backyard, and I adopted a rescue dog, a gentle golden retriever mix I named Chance, who became my constant companion. I also started therapy, working through the complex emotions of the family betrayal with Dr. Mercer, who specialized in family trauma. What you're experiencing is a form of grief, she explained in one session. You're mourning the family relationship you thought you had, while coming to terms with the reality of what it actually was. With her guidance, I began to understand that my parents' behavior wasn't my fault, that their inability to set boundaries with Tiffany and their willingness to sacrifice my interests for hers reflected their issues, not my worth. Work became a refuge again rather than a stress point. 6 months after the court case, I applied for and received a promotion to nursing education coordinator, a role that allowed me to share my experience with new nurses and reduce the physical demands of floor nursing. And slowly, I made the house truly mine. I replaced the bathroom fixtures, painted each room colors I loved, and planted perennials that would return year after year. I built a life that didn't revolve around family approval or expectations. A life that reflected my values and choices. As for Tiffany, she remained a ghost in my life, present in memory and family history, but absent in reality. I heard through my mother that she had completed the treatment program and found a job as an administrative assistant at a community arts center. She was living in a small apartment and attending Gamblers' Anonymous meetings twice weekly. I was glad for her progress, but not ready for direct contact. My relationship with my parents entered a new phase, cautious, limited, but not completely severed. We spoke on the phone occasionally. I met them for lunch every few weeks, always in public places. They respected my boundaries, never asking to visit the house unless I offered, never bringing up Tiffany unless relevant to the conversation. The wounds were healing, but the scars would always remain, visible reminders of a painful lesson about family, boundaries, and the true meaning of home. 6 months after the court case, I hosted my first real house party. Nothing extravagant, just a gathering of friends from work, neighbors I'd grown close to, and a few new acquaintances from my pottery class, a hobby I'd started as stress relief during the lawsuit. We grilled in the backyard, played board games in the living room, and shared stories on the porch late into the evening. As I looked around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who celebrated my successes without resentment, I realized I was building something more valuable than just a house. I was creating a home filled with genuine connections. When the 1-year anniversary of my homeownership arrived, I took a personal day from work and spent it reflecting. I sat in each room of the house, appreciating the transformations. Walls now painted in colors I loved, furniture arranged for comfort rather than show, photos of friends and travels displayed prominently. I'd replaced the kitchen countertops with butcher block, installed shelves for my growing cookbook collection, and converted the smallest bedroom into a cozy reading nook with a window seat overlooking the backyard. My therapy sessions with Dr. Mercer had helped me understand that the family dynamics I'd grown up with weren't healthy. "You were cast in the role of the responsible one," she explained, which might seem like a compliment, but it came with unfair expectations. Your achievements weren't celebrated because they were expected, while your sister's smallest efforts received praise because expectations for her were so low. This insight helped me see that my parents' behavior during the lawsuit wasn't a sudden betrayal, but the extreme manifestation of patterns that had existed throughout my childhood. They had always prioritized Tiffany's needs and wants, seeing her as requiring protection while viewing me as self-sufficient. The irony, Dr. Mercer noted, is that by treating you as the strong one who needed less support, they may have helped create that strength in you, the very resilience that got you through this ordeal. Understanding didn't equal forgiveness, but it did help me move forward. I established clear boundaries with my parents. We could rebuild a relationship, but it would be on new terms. No financial discussions. No comparisons between Tiffany and me. No unsolicited advice about my life choices. My mother struggled with these boundaries at first. "I'm just trying to be involved in your life," she protested when I declined to discuss my investment strategy during one lunch. "There's a difference between being involved and overstepping," I explained gently but firmly. "We can talk about my work, my friends, my hobbies, but my finances are private." Gradually, she adjusted, finding new ways to connect that respected my autonomy. My father, surprisingly, adapted more easily. "You've earned the right to set your own terms," he said during one of our conversations. "I may not always understand your boundaries, but I'll try to respect them." As for Tiffany, I didn't see or speak to her for nearly 2 years after the court case. Then one Saturday morning, I ran into her at the farmer's market downtown. I almost didn't recognize her. Her typically dramatic fashion had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her wild hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Amelia," she said, clearly as surprised as I was. "Hi." We stood awkwardly among stands of fresh produce and artisanal bread. Finally, I managed. "How are you?" "Better," she replied. "I'm working at the Community Arts Center full-time now, teaching children's classes and doing administrative work." "That's good," I said, meaning it. Teaching had always been where her creative energy shined brightest, even if briefly. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice low, "for everything with the house, the lawsuit. I was in a terrible place, but that's no excuse. What I did, what I convinced Mom and Dad to do, was wrong." It wasn't a perfect apology. There was still a hint of justification in her reference to being in a terrible place. But it was more accountability than I'd ever heard from her before. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, not quite ready to say, "I forgive you," but acknowledging her effort. "Your house," she said hesitantly. "Is it nice? Are you happy there?" "Yes," I answered simply. "It's exactly where I'm supposed to be." We parted with an awkward half-hug and a promise to catch up sometime that we both knew might not happen. But the encounter left me feeling lighter, as if a chapter had finally closed. Over time, I developed a new understanding of family, one that encompassed chosen connections as well as blood relations. My friend Natalie and her husband invited me for all major holidays. My neighbor Mrs. Chen taught me to grow tomatoes and shared her family recipes. My colleague Jordan and his wife became my emergency contacts. These relationships weren't conditional on what I could provide or how I could serve others' needs. They were based on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine care, the foundation of healthy connections that I hadn't fully experienced in my family of origin. I even started dating again after putting my personal life on hold during the lawsuit stress. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates and museum visits, slowly opening myself to the possibility of sharing my life with someone. Eventually, I met Daniel, a high school history teacher with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that put me at ease. On our third date, when I cautiously shared the story of my family's lawsuit, he didn't respond with disbelief or awkward sympathy. "That must have been incredibly painful," he said instead. "Thank you for trusting me enough to share it." As our relationship developed, I appreciated how Daniel understood my need for independence and financial autonomy without taking it personally. "Your house is an achievement you should be proud of," he said the first time I invited him over. "I'm honored to be welcomed into it." 2.5 years after the lawsuit, I can honestly say I'm at peace with what happened. The experience, though painful, taught me invaluable lessons about boundaries, self-worth, and the true meaning of family. I learned that sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with those we love most. That saying no doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest about what you can give without resentment or harm to yourself. I discovered that my worth isn't measured by how much I sacrifice for others, but by how authentically I live according to my values. That true love, whether from family, friends, or partners, doesn't come with conditions or expectations of self-sacrifice. Most importantly, I found that home isn't just a physical structure of wood and stone. It's a space where you feel valued, respected, and free to be yourself. Sometimes that means creating distance from those who can't provide that safety, even if they share your blood. If my story resonates with you, know that you're not alone in facing family expectations that feel unfair or boundaries that get crossed. You have the right to create a life that brings you joy and peace, even if that means disappointing others who have their own agendas for your resources or achievements. Have you ever had to stand up to family expectations that seemed unreasonable? Or found yourself always expected to be the responsible one while others got bailed out? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating complicated relationships and finding your own path. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to building a true home, both the physical house I fought for and the emotional sanctuary I created within myself.